Hi, and welcome to the first video in my serve course. I'm really happy to have you on board, and I'm excited to teach you some new things that can help you improve and see better results on the tennis court. Before we get right into the instructional content, I just want to paint you a quick picture, kind of draw you a quick roadmap, and let you know what to expect throughout this course. This is obviously video number 1, and in this video we're going to be talking about grips and stance. And this video is broken up into 3 parts. The first part, just a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about how to identify different types of grips so that you can tell what grip you're using exactly. It's really important. Then we're going to get into looking at pro footage and seeing what grips that the pros actually use themselves. And we'll be looking at a lot of top name pro examples so that you can see exactly what the pros are using to hit their own serves so effectively. Then we're going to look at stance, and I'm going to show you 3 different stances that you can choose, and you'll see that it's kind of a style thing. You don't have to use a certain stance, but there are certain things that you want to avoid and certain things that you want to make sure that you're doing when you do select a certain stance that you're going to use. So that's a quick overview of video number 1. Video number 2, which you'll receive a couple of days from now in another email, is going to be focused on the trophy pose. Video number 3 is going to be focused on the racket drop. Video 4 is going to focus on contact points, really important elements there. And video 5 is going to focus on the follow through. So those are your 5 videos. That's what they're going to go over. You're going to get them one video at a time, and you'll be able to focus and really kind of digest and go over the content in each one before moving on to the next one. It's going to be almost 2 hours of just pure instructional content, so a lot of concepts that we'll be going over. And I've truthfully done my best to make this as comprehensive as possible. I'm not holding anything back here. I really want you all to see big improvements by learning the really important parts of a good, sound, fundamental service motion. So with that, let's go ahead and get right into video number 1, talking about grips and stance. Before we start taking a look at pro video and seeing what type of grips that the pros use in order to hit their serves so effectively, I just want to do a quick grip lesson to make sure that we're all totally on the same page and we just have a good understanding of the different terminology and different things I'm going to be referring to as we start to take a look at their technique and see what they're doing exactly. So the way that we tell what type of grip that we have has to do with where we put the base knuckle of our dominant hand and the heel pad of our dominant hand, exactly where on the handle or on the grip of the racket. Every tennis racket has an octagon-shaped grip. This is a bottom view of the butt cap of a Wilson racket, and you can clearly see 8 different sides to the butt cap. 8 different sides. And what grip you have will be determined by where your base knuckle is and where the heel pad of your hand is. And the way that we kind of tell what that is by associating the different angles of the grip to different numbers. And the way that this works, and the way that we're looking at this grip right now, what is as if the racket was on edge. So the frame or the racket face would be vertically aligned right here. We get, using the butt cap picture that I found here, we don't actually see the head or the racket face, but this is on edge. So the frame, the racket head, would be perpendicular to the court surface or to the ground or wherever you happen to be holding it. Okay, that's really important to point out. So the racket is on its side here, it's on edge. And when the racket is on edge, we number the different bevels. These are called bevels of the grip, 1 through 8, starting from the top. So this would be number 1, 2, 3 is flat on the side, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay? So we tell what grip we have based on what number our base knuckle is and what number our heel pad is on. A continental grip which is just kind of a neutral grip, has the base knuckle and the heel pad on bevel number 2. It's important to point out that there's a little bit of wiggle room here. I mean, we can see that bevel number 2, it's flat and it covers a little bit of area, right? I mean, I don't know how much exactly. I'm looking at my racket right now. This is probably, bevel number 2. It's a Wilson racket. Shapes vary a little bit by manufacturer, by the way. But bevel number 2 on my Wilson racket is probably maybe almost a half of an inch. So there's a little bit of wiggle room along bevel number 2, but in general, if you can put your base knuckle right dead in the middle of this flat bevel and your heel pad right in the middle of this flat bevel, you have a continental grip. An Eastern forehand grip is bevel number 3, both for index finger knuckle, base knuckle, and heel pad. Okay? Semi-Western grip is number 4, and full Western grip is number 5. Eastern backhand grip is a little bit different. We have base knuckle up on number 1, and heel pad actually comes over on number 8. And that causes the knuckles, you'll notice, to be straight across bevel number 1. For a continental, Eastern forehand, semi-Western forehand, and full Western forehand, if you follow my directions and you put both your base knuckle and the heel pad on the associated bevel number, you'll notice that your hand is spread out. And your knuckles, if you draw a line kind of across the big knuckles of your hand, you'll see that they're at an angle, at about a 45-degree angle across the grip. An Eastern backhand grip, a one-handed backhand grip, is different. It has the knuckles straight across or straight down the bevel. So a little bit different. So those are your different types of grips. By the way, I'm going over these instructions for a right-handed player. If you're a left-handed player, it's all the same numbers, but it goes counterclockwise. So this would be bevel number 1 starting from the top for a lefty, bevel number 2, bevel number 3, bevel number 4, so on and so forth. So continental grip, Eastern forehand, semi-Western, and full Western forehand grip. So that's how you tell exactly what grip you have. Those are the numbered bevels, the different types of grips. Now we're on the same page as far as being able to identify different types of grips. Now that we know which grips are which, let's take a look at a couple of pro examples and see exactly where their grips are on their serves. We're going to start off with Nadal here. And check out his racket, how it's on edge here. It's perpendicular to the court surface, the racket face, which means that this, remember he's left-handed, this flat bevel on the side of the racket is number 3. Number 2 is the smaller angled one up on top, towards the top rather, and the one all the way on the top is number 1. And if we draw a straight line right down number 3, we can see that his big knuckle, his base knuckle, which is up here, is definitely not on number 3. It's significantly higher than that. It's not all the way up on number 1, but it might be pretty close to number 1. We really can't tell for sure without looking down on top of his grip. But in just tracing a line down bevel number 3, which would be Eastern forehand, we can see that his ring finger knuckle and his pinky finger knuckle are both down towards bevel number 3. And here's the kind of the angled knuckles across the grip like I was talking about before, pretty close to about a 45-degree angle across. And something else I'd like to point out is that when you do have a continental grip, which is what Rafa has here, with his base knuckle up somewhere on number 2, it's very, very natural when your heel pad is also on number 2, that your index finger will kind of be curved and curled around. That's a pattern that you'll see as we point out other professional players and the grips that they use. So again, bevel number 3, drawing a straight line across, we see his base knuckle definitely higher than that. Not as high as number 1, he's definitely somewhere up on bevel number 2. So he's got a continental grip here. Next up, we've got Roddick. I'm sorry I don't have as close. I looked through all my Roddick footage, obviously one of the biggest servers of all time, which is why I wanted to look at him. And I don't have as much of a close-up with him, but we can see very clearly here the flat bevel number 3, which would be for an Eastern forehand grip. And we can see his knuckles curved across the grip at an angle. We can see that index finger kind of curled around the grip. And base knuckle of the index finger well above bevel number 3. It's very, very common for professional players to start with the racket on edge in their motion. You don't have to do it that way by any means, but it's a very common thing to do. And so it's very easy for us to see what kind of grip he has here because the racket is on edge. So this is bevel number 3 flat on the side and big knuckle, base knuckle of his index finger well above bevel number 3. All right, next up we've got Djokovic, who, from what I can tell here, based on my videos, has the closest grip to bevel number 1 up on the top. See how high his base knuckle is? And here we see kind of the shadowed bevel number 3 on the side. Again, racket on edge. Again, knuckles at an angle across the grip. Again, we have a curled index finger here. And again, this is flat bevel number 3 on the side. And his big knuckle is really pretty far up on the side. We're going to talk more about using different types of grips for your serve. It could be that he's hitting a topspin serve here, a kick serve. I'm not positive, to be totally honest with you, but very often when players are trying to get a lot of topspin, they'll turn their grip more up towards bevel number 1. And we're going to get into why in later videos. I'm not going to get into it right now, but he's certainly not on bevel number 3. He's well above bevel number 3, maybe even a little bit past bevel number 2. And again, angled knuckles, curved index finger. And the last person we're going to look at is Roger. Got a little bit more of a zoomed in look here. His racket is not perpendicular here. It's angled a little bit. And I'm sorry, I wish I had a shot of him where he was facing the sun instead of away from the sun so that we could see the bevels a little bit more clearly. But we can see the angle of the racket here. So his number 3 bevel is not facing straight towards the camera. It's actually facing down towards the court a little bit, down towards the bottom of the grip, the way that he has it twisted. Again, we see the angle of his knuckles across the grip. His knuckles are not parallel with the grip. We see that curved index finger here. We can see that space between his middle finger and his index finger. And if we draw a line across bevel number 3, we can clearly see that his base knuckle is well above bevel number 3. He's not as high up as Djokovic was, but certainly a continental grip. So as we go through and look at these different pros, we're seeing very, very close similarities. And the big grip mistake that recreational players make, you need to really listen carefully to me here, is that they tend to have their grip towards bevel number 3. They tend to have an Eastern forehand grip, or maybe even further. And that will be detrimental to your long-term improvement in your service technique. I'm not going to get into the reasons why in this video. I will in later videos in this course, but just trust me on that for right now. And as we've gone through, we've clearly seen that the base knuckle is not on number 3. It's well above number 3 in each of these examples. And this is, I did not cherry pick these examples. If I go through the videos that I have of each of these players and look at every serve that I have of them on record, we will not see one example of any of these players hitting a serve with the knuckle on bevel number 3. It will all be bevel number 2 or higher than that, towards bevel number 1. So that's the most important thing that I can point out to you right now as you continue with your quest towards a better serve, continental grip, or even a little bit more towards bevel number 1 than that. So base knuckle of your index finger on bevel 2, heel pad of the hand on number 2. You don't have to be super picky about the heel pad, by the way, as long as your knuckles are spread across the grip, and as long as your base knuckle is on number 2, or somewhere right around number 2, then those are the most important things. The heel pad can be a little bit tricky to tell where you're at sometimes, but if you're anywhere looking anything like this, as long as your knuckle is not on number 3 or any lower than number 3, then you're on the right track. And these are the most important things to consider when it comes to choosing a grip for your service motion. Now we're going to do some talking about stance, which refers to how you set your feet up in preparation for your serve. Stance and grip are kind of similar in that there are two elements of your service technique that you set up prior to actually engaging your motion. But they're both very, very important because they set the tone or kind of set up various positions with your body that are very useful, or if you do it incorrectly, very destructive to the quality of your serve as you continue to go through the rest of your motion. So really important stuff. And I'm going to show you 3 different stances here that professional players use. And these 3 different players all have spent a lot of time in the top 10. Roddick, of course, just recently has fallen outside of the top 10, but obviously one of the best serves ever in the history of tennis, so we can learn a lot from him. And I'm going to show you, again, 3 different stances, and you can pick and choose between each of these 3. There's no right or wrong way. We're going to talk about that kind of towards the end here, but let's just go ahead and jump into the different types. And the type that Roddick kind of made popular, or maybe even made famous, is the pinpoint stance. And it's called that because very early in his motion, and Roddick kind of has this habit of kind of initially setting up in a wide stance as he's bouncing the ball and preparing for his motion, but very early on, and before his motion really even starts, it's kind of during his preparation phase, like right here, his back foot comes up very close to his front foot. And this is called a pinpoint stance, where your feet are close together, hence, the name, pinpoint. You're kind of on one point of the court with your feet below you. Other servers who use a pinpoint stance, their feet are actually touching together. Monfils is very close together early in his motion and keeps both of his feet very close together. He would be another example of a pinpoint stance. But Roddick, before his motion really even begins, gets his feet together, and then they stay there throughout the entire motion, all the way up until the point where he launches himself up towards the ball. So pinpoint stance, feet close together during preparation, and they stay close together throughout his entire motion. Okay, so that would be an example of a pinpoint stance. Next up, we have, we'll get to him next. I want to show you next a platform stance. Obviously, somebody who spent a lot of time in the top 10. Platform stance servers begin with their feet wider, right around shoulder width apart, sometimes even a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. Pete Sampras also had a platform stance and began a little bit wider than what Roger is showing us here. But a platform stance begins wide, and it's called platform because it's a wider base, and stays wide throughout the motion, as opposed to Roddick, who started close and stayed close. Okay? And then next, I want to show you Andy Murray, who puts the two together into what we call, or what I call, a hybrid stance. I think that's pretty common terminology for this, is hybrid. You'll see Murray here begin in a wide stance, a little bit wider than what Roger was showing us. And then as he goes to his trophy pose position, his feet come together to a pinpoint stance. So this is a hybrid stance, starting from platform and then transitioning to pinpoint. Now, the fact that we just saw 3 top 10 players using different kinds of stances, let me go back to each of them here. Here we have Murray, hybrid stance. He's about to switch to pinpoint. Here we have Roger, platform stance. And here we have Roddick, pinpoint stance. The fact that we have 3 top 10 caliber players, I'll say caliber players since Roddick, is, as I recorded this, is not currently in the top 10. The fact that we have 3 top 10 caliber players all using different types of stances should tell you that you can be successful using a variety of different stances. And those are kind of the 3 main varieties. There's even other, kind of combinations of those different main elements. The important thing for you watching at home is that you pick a stance, a way to set up with your feet that's comfortable, it's natural, it allows you to stay in balance, and it allows you to freely use your lower body. It allows you to be able to load up that lower body and use it strongly and powerfully the way that you're supposed to. And we're going to talk about how to do that in later videos. We're not going to get into that right now, but just I want to throw that out there right now. Those are the main things you want to look for: balance, comfort. It should be relatively natural for you, and you should be able to use your lower body freely to be able to create power and drive up towards the ball, which we'll talk about later. So there is no right or wrong thing to do with your feet. I will point out one thing that's not a good idea. You'll see that each of these three players, as they set up, their right foot is at least a little bit behind their left. Their back foot is at least a little bit behind their front foot. I will say that that's important. And it's kind of old school tennis teaching that the front foot should point towards the net post and the back foot should be parallel to the baseline. Those are good rules of thumb. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's a good general rule of thumb. You'll see Roger here, both feet are very close to parallel. He might shift this front foot. Now he stays real close to parallel here with both feet throughout this motion. But what that does, taking that right foot or that back foot and keeping it at least a little bit behind the front foot, is it allows for an easier rotation back with your core, which we'll get into in a future video. But I just wanted to throw that out there. That's one thing that you want to avoid. Other than that, make sure it's comfortable and natural. Make sure that it's easier for you to stay in balance and that you can use your lower body freely. If those three criteria are met, then you're on the right path with your stance, and you can copy any three of these different styles and be very, very successful. Thank you so much for joining me here in video number 1 of 5 within my serve course. I really appreciate having you as a viewer here, and I hope that you really enjoyed it and you've already learned a lot just within this first video. Look for video number 2. You're going to be getting it in a couple of days, maybe a week from now at the most, so keep an eye on your email inbox. And remember, in video number 2, we're going to be talking about the trophy pose, which is super, super important to set yourself up correctly so that you can get great results leading up to contact. Until then, do me a favor. Right below this video, you'll see 3 buttons. You'll see a Facebook button, a Twitter button, and an email button. And you can click those to share this free course with your friends, teammates, other club members where you play tennis, whatever. If you appreciate the instruction that I'm giving you here, do me a favor and share it with other people as well, and let them know about this free course. All they have to do is sign up just like you did, and they'll get all 5 videos just like you're going to. So thank you for doing that, and keep an eye on your inbox. I'll be talking to you again really soon in video number 2.